All right, so here's my fourth gen ND Miata. Today I'm gonna, or this video anyways, I'm gonna talk about my Ohlins suspension. So I have Ohlins. Let's see, you guys can't see it there. Let's see if you guys can see it here. So that's my Ohlins suspension. These are the Ohlins from God, what's the shop called? God, now I can't remember the shop. From SakeBomb. SakeBomb. They have the other name. Now I can't remember what it's called. Miata Speed. SakeBomb Miata Speed. Out in Fremont, California. So that's where they're located, and they have their own version of Ohlins instead of just the regular Ohlins that everyone else has. Like, for example, like Goodwin Racing. The Ohlins that they have is just the off-the-shelf Ohlins. And I think they call that one road and track. They call that particular Ohlins, the off-the-shelf Ohlins road and track. The SakeBombs are a modified version of that, similar to that, but better. They have more travel, much more travel actually. So these are the SakeBomb Miata Speed Ohlins LongTravel. They call them LongTravel something. LongTravel Ohlins basically. I just call them Mazda Speed or SakeBomb LongTravel Ohlins. So anyways, so the spring rate on these ones, you can choose what spring rate you want. For my purpose, what I want out of this car is basically a street only driven car, focusing on back roads, mountain roads, canyons. That's the main focus. No track days. I have no interest in track days. No autocross. I have no interest in autocross. Basically I don't have any of that interest at all. All I care about is driving through the mountains and having that feeling of being through the mountains. This car is basically a replacement for motorcycles. Well, big motorcycles. So I'm a motorcycle guy. I'm mainly a motorcycle guy. I've always been, for the most part, a motorcycle guy. When I was I guess a teenager, I kind of liked cars too, but not I wasn't really totally into it. But anyways, so the past year or so, I decided that I don't want to ride big motorcycles anymore. I'm just gonna stick to small motorcycles. So this car was basically a replacement of big motorcycles. I was just when I ride big motorcycles, I can't help myself, and I just ride too aggressively for street, too fast for street. I just one of these days that's gonna catch up to me, and so I decided I'm too old for that shit. So I'm nearing midlife. I'm almost at midlife, and this is my midlife crisis car. Kind of odd. That's kind of backwards. Usually people that do midlife, they kind of get into more risk. Here I'm having more risk from a motorcycle into a car, so that's actually I actually decrease my risk. So that's kind of funny, I think. Anyways, so this suspension here is strictly for street back roads. So as far as got a scratch here. I didn't even see that. So the spring rate on here, I have the front 6 kilograms and the rear is 3 kilograms. So 6.3. So 6.3 is pretty soft. If you look at all the coilovers that are out there, other coilovers, or even the regular Ohlins coilover, people usually using something like 7 4.5. That's very common, 7 4.5. So 6.3 translating into inch pound or foot pound. I should say inch pound. I say foot pound. Is it inch pound or foot pound? I forget now. Is it foot pound? No, inch pound. But anyways, translating that into what the factory spring rate is. The factory, if I can remember right, for the Cub, for the non-Cub, for the regular non-Club model, the rear is I think 80 pounds, and the front is about 156 pounds. 156, 160 pounds. So basically, kind of like a 2-to-1 ratio, as far as the front is twice as firm as the rear is as far as spring rate. And translating the 6 kilogram and 3 kilogram, that comes out to 300 and I think it's 320 or 325, somewhere around there, around 320-ish pounds in the front, and the back 3 kilogram comes out to about 100 and I think about 160-ish, I think, something like that. So basically, I'm doubling the spring rate compared to the regular suspension for the regular model. On the Cub model, the front is the same as the regular model at 156-ish, 160, but the regular one is 80 pounds, but the Club model is 100 pounds. So basically my ratio that I kept for the front and back is essentially 2-to-1. You know, the front is double the firmness as the back, and the reason why I think that ratio works best compared to everything else. And Car Step Racing, Car Step, they make those fancy sway bars. They found that it's very close to 2-to-1 to be the best as well. It's like, I think it's a little bit more like 1.9 or 1.8 something to 1. It works better, but most other companies are using a little bit less than that. Most companies are using like a 2 to 1.5-ish, 1.6-ish ratio. So basically the rear is going to be firmer, considerably firmer than the front. The rear is like instead of half the firmness, it's more like 2/3 the firmness of the front. So that makes the rear really really firm. But anyways, back to the spring rate here. So why I chose that, because I don't want, again, I have this set up mainly for stock, or excuse me, for street use only. I have no interest in tracking and autocross. So none of that stuff doesn't interest me. So I don't want track weighted springs. I don't want that harshness. So now that I have this for over a year and probably close, not quite 10,000 miles yet. I don't think. I think less than 10,000 miles. Maybe close to over 8,000. Probably closer to 9. Well, actually, yeah, almost 10,000 miles. Because I put these coilovers in around the same time that I got the last set of tires, which was 9,000 miles. So yeah, so these things have close to 10,000 miles already. So after riding it, when I'm going through the mountains, for the most part, it feels fine. It feels great. It feels perfect, actually. It feels fantastic. But sometimes, every once in a while, I'll drive really fast. Normally, the back road that I take this car on, the speed limit is 25 miles an hour. And I usually drive, for the most part, double that. I usually drive about 50 miles an hour through there. And that's more than enough. That's, for the most part, I'm having fun. And every once in a while, I feel like I want to go even faster. Then I go at 60 miles an hour. And that's about as fast as I want to go. Any more than that, I get into stupid speeds for that road. And a few times, and I've even done this a few times, where I drove even faster than that, where I drove up to 80 miles an hour a couple times. But I don't see myself doing that again anymore, because that speed in that road is just stupid speed. It's like there's like no margin of error. You're going too close to driving at 10 level, so there's like no margin of error. Something happens, it's the carnage. The carnage that could result from that life's loss. It's not acceptable to me. So I won't be ever doing that again. And so I'll probably say, about 60 miles an hour is good if I want to be like really aggressive. Otherwise, I'd rather stick to 50 miles an hour. At 50 miles an hour, I feel very safe. There's a ton of margin of safety, margin of error. At 50 miles an hour, I feel just as safe as if I was doing 40 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour. There isn't much of a difference, I don't think, because of the suspension work and everything, and the braking and the better tires and everything that I did to this car. That that threshold of performance is risen up. So basically what that means is the speed, the level of speed and control, how much control you have has increased. So I feel perfectly safe at 50, and it still feels really fast, even though it feels like you're doing 100 miles an hour, but you're actually only doing 50. And that's the unique thing about the Miata. No other car really does that. That has that same feeling that Miata has, going really fast. But you look down at the speed limit or speed odometer, and you're like, oh, I'm hardly doing that fast at all, right? So 6.3 spring rate, I believe, is perfect for street use. Every once in a while, like I said, when I go, if I had gone really stupid fast over 60, I feel like, oh, maybe the spring rate could be a little bit firmer. But then every once in a while, when I'm driving around and around town and stuff, I'm like, man, this thing is like kind of bumpy and kind of harsh. It feels just as bumpy as my pickup truck. Actually, it feels, come to think of it, actually feels bumpier than my pickup truck. A funny thing, the other day I picked up my sister. She went somewhere and I had to pick her up, and that was the first time she ever sat in my car. Had been in my car, and she was like, "Geez, this car is just as bumpy as your truck." And I started laughing. And it's true. It's just as bumpy as when you have a pickup truck and it's completely empty in the back. You don't have nothing in there. It's very bumpy and bouncy, and this car feels like that. It actually feels possibly even a little bit bumpier than that, just because the spring is so firm. At 6.3, at 6.3 is basically double the factory spring rate, so that's very firm. So every once in a while I'm like, man, it feels too firm, too bumpy. Then I thought about it. Oh, so the 6.3 spring rate is perfect for street use, because every once in a while I feel like it's a little bit too soft, and every once in a while I feel like it's too firm. So that tells me it's perfect. Now if I was to always thinking, oh, this is too firm all the time, and I feel like, oh, it's never soft enough, then that means it's probably too firm. And if I feel like, oh, it's too soft, and I never feel like it's firm enough, then that means it's probably too soft. But I don't feel that. I feel that every once in a while it's too soft, every once in a while it's a little bit too soft, not too soft, just a tiny bit too soft and a tiny bit too firm. And that tells me that the spring rate on this is perfect for what it is. So it's fantastic street setup. And you look at my wheel gap here, and I'm using a larger size tire, right? 215, 45, 17. So a little bit wider and a little bit more sidewall, and you still have two and a half fingers basically, both the front and back like that. So I didn't lower the ride height very much. I measured where the pinch weld is down here, so I measured that to the ground. I wanted to make sure that I have at least 5 inches of ground clearance. Actually, a little bit over 5 inches, like 5 1/4 or something like that, or 5 1/8. Actually, closer to 5 1/8, I think. Not quite 5 1/4, 5 1/8. So if I sit in it and I have a passenger in it, and say we have luggage or whatever, then it probably would squat down to about 5 inches of ground clearance, and that's what I wanted, because I wanted, it's a street, it's focused for street use. And street use, there's lots of bumpy roads and speed bumps and steep driveways and such. I don't want any scraping, and I haven't had any problem with scraping. I think I only scraped this car a couple times, and it wasn't from this part down here behind the front wheel, where you usually scrape with a speed bump. I never had that happen. I've only scraped the front lip a few times on those those parking when you in a parking lot, you have the little bumps. Initially when I first set this, I actually had to set it lower, so I actually touched those bumps or a curb. When you park in a spot, you go up to like a store or whatever, you have the sidewalk, so it's elevated, right? So I would, if I park all the way, I would actually hit that curb. So I actually have it elevated where those little parking bumps, it will actually go over the parking bumps with plenty of clearance. And it depends on the curb. Because some curbs are higher than others. The high curbs it will still touch, but the low curbs it will actually just barely go over it. Just barely. I mean, like millimeters. I'm talking about like 1-2 millimeters. So it's very usable street setup wise. very practical. Um, yeah, so that's the ride height, the spring rate. As far as dampening adjustment on here, I played with it quite a bit. I played with the dampening for like a year, literally a year. Each time I did one click, I would drive the thing for a week before I did another click. So I would, let's say for example, whatever click I had, I started out with like I think I started out with like 15 clicks. So you start out. So basically, what you do is you go clockwise until it stops. So that means it's the valve is fully closed, so everything is really slow. The oil is moving really slow, if hardly at all. From that fully closed, I open it up, click 15 times, and that's where I started out. The front and rear, both the same 15 times. Then I would drive that for like a week. Then I would do one click. Initially, I kept the front and rear the same amount of clicks, and I ran it like that for several months. Front and rear the same. Then I started to have a difference in clicks. So say for example, instead of 15 clicks here, I might have 14 clicks in the front and 15 clicks in the rear. And each time I did that, I would run it for a week before I did another click, and so on and so forth. That's why it took me literally a year to get to find the spot where I'm at. And so right now, I believe, and I haven't touched this in quite a while, in like at least 4 months or more, I haven't touched these. So I believe right now they're at 7 clicks in the front, and the back has, was it 4 or 5 more clicks? I forget now. So it's 7 and I think 12, 7 in the front and 12 in the back, or maybe 11. So it's neither 12 or 11, I can't remember. But anyways, so yeah, so it took a year of fiddling with this to find that the perfect medium for what I want to do. So at those clicks, they're good for mountain roads on regular, just everyday driving. They might be a little bit on the firm side. If I was to set this up for like regular, just normal everyday daily driving, instead of 7 in the front, I would probably go with like 9 in the front maybe. And the same difference, 4 or 5 difference between the front and back. But anyways, I don't want to always mess with it. I should set it and forget it sort of thing. It's what I would rather do. So yeah. So that's my Ohlins setup. How many clicks? The ride height, and the ride height. Basically, how I got that, like I mentioned, because I wanted a certain amount of ground clearance, right? So that's the ride height, and the Ohlins has an independent. I shouldn't say that's not the correct word to use. It has a actual ride height adjustment and also a preload sag adjustment. So my preload, and I think you've seen this videos of this when I talked about preload before. My preload, I set it at 30% sag. So basically, when I lift the car up and the wheel is hanging all the way down, I measure it. Then I let it back down and let it sit on itself. Then I measure how much it compresses, and I want that how much it compresses, basically how much it sags down, how much the car sags down. I want that to be at 30%, and that's what I have it at. I have it set at 30% sag. I have the preload set at 30% sag on all 4 corners, and I think that's perfect. Now I played around with it a little bit. I gave it a little bit more. I gave it as much as 33% sag, and I gave it as little as I think 25% sag, and for the most part 30. I think 30% is perfect. And this is pretty much true with almost all suspension. When you set suspension sag, your target aim should be about 30, and you can go a little bit more or a little bit less from there. But I find that if the spring rate is correct for what you want, if the spring rate is correct for what you want, the sag at 30%, you set your preload so you have 30% sag, it's pretty much spot on. And this is true for it's true for a car, it's true for motorcycles, true for mountain bike, and that's what my suspension background is. My suspension background is with mountain bikes and motorcycles, and that's how I set those up too. I set it at 30% sag. It doesn't matter how much travel I have on whatever vehicle. It doesn't matter if it's 3 inches of travel or 6 inches of travel, whatever. I always set it at 30% sag. Set the preload at 30% sag, and that's if your spring rate is proper. for you. You know, if the spring rate's not proper, then that sag, it's kind of, you know, get the proper spring rate. You know, if you have the improper spring rate, and you don't have you know, you try to just leave at 30%, it doesn't work as well. You know, it still does work, but you have to kind of play around with that sag a little bit more. You might have to make it so that way it has less sag. Instead of 30%, it's only 25 or even 20% if it's too soft. You know, because if the spring rate is too soft and you set it at 30% sag, the suspension will bottom out too easily. So you have to set the sag so that way it has less sag, so down to 20% or something like that. And sometimes if your spring rate is like too firm and you have it at 30%, it might feel like the ride's too hard. So in that case, you might have to increase the sag 35% or something like that. But your target should be about 30%. So that's it. So that's sag, ride height, dampening adjustment. All right. So that's my thought on how it works. And these Ohlins, you know, once this setup, it's how it is. It's fantastic. I really enjoy it. It makes the car feel very, you know, very controlled, very stable. But you know, alongside the coilovers, but also along with the sway bars as well. And I'll make a separate video on sway bars.